it's kind of awkward on my side because I don't really want to be the lead of a project because it's a lot of stress. But also, like, if you have me on a project, typically I'm going to be most useful as an ideas guy and someone who designs things. But if you're like, I want to make it this, and I design like 95% of the systems, and you're like, but I didn't really like that. Like, what? What? So it's hard for me not to lead a project or be in a role where I have to actually deign what the project's going to be or look like as an end product. Because even if I write the story, if it has nothing to do with what your end product was supposed to look like, my job was useless.
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge, managing all those trade-offs and trying to manage all the different hats and whatnot. We got here. Hey, what's up, Killmonger? Welcome, dude.
Getting a lot of people in now.
Yeah, that's picking up.
Really hard to hear you, Killmonger. Just a heads up. So, all right. I actually put together an agenda for this.
All right.
And so we kind of go through a couple of things that I just wanted to make everyone aware of what's going on. So right now we have, as you notice, like Fuhan and I have been primarily the people here. It looks like Jimmy Boy is dealing with some stuff in his real life, so he's kind of taking a break for a little while, and we're going to be heading up, everything else in the meantime. So since he was kind of taking care of the new site redesign, that kind of leaves a gap there. In the short term, I'm going to be creating PBBG Lite, which is going to be a very ultra lightweight listing system with tags, and it's going to feature a separate database than the current site is, and it's going to be like a Google-esque kind of game search engine. It'll be very, very light, very easy. Not a whole lot of features on there.
Simple.
Very simple. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'll have a demo. I'll put up some screenshots of what the design is looking like in the showcase chat for everyone to check out. So I think the design is looking really good. I like the color theme and everything. So
yeah. What I saw looked good. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I was talking to Delta about this, I think yesterday or the day before. We kind of, it's easy to get overly ambitious. I'm sure you guys have all experienced that as developers. You want to kind of take on everything. You have all these grand visions, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like we hit that a little bit with our, our rewrite that we tried doing with this, the open source thing. And as often does happen, I think we tended to over engineer a little bit and, design tech versus, delivering features, which is, it's hard not to do that. So when Chris or Delta was telling me about the light version, it sounds very appealing to just kind of like focus on very, 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 very fast deliverable thing. Like, here's a list of the stuff that we have, maybe it will solve some of our data quality issues and, become more usable for players more quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for taking the initiative on that, man. Appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm using, if anyone's interested, I'm using a application framework called SvelteKit, which is in beta right now. It's officially supported by the Svelte team, which is a new JavaScript framework. But it's literally just like, it's the demo app, and then changed a bunch of the text, and then hook up a database in the back end. That's pretty much it. So it's really not going to be a whole lot of features built into, at least at first.
Enough, man.
Yeah, that's true.
As long as it does the job. Yeah.
Isn't this how a lot of dystopian sci-fi movies start? Like, we're using some untested technology to try something.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. I'm down with it.
Yeah. Well, if PBBG Lite becomes the next Skynet, there you go. Yeah. Then I'm kind of okay with it. I'm fine.
Yeah. We'll leave our mark on the world.
Yeah. Exactly. We'll get our name out there one way or the other.
Yeah. You got anybody here familiar with Svelte at all?
Actually, we're related. The company I work for, we're doing a massive transition for a lot of services, and we're changing to SvelteKit.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, it's a really big change, but it seems to be the way forward. Especially like everyone thought SPAs were the way, and now it's the opposite. And
yeah, no one wants a SPA.
I'm glad I never learned how to do that then.
Yeah. Yeah. I never learned React, and I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I was just diving into Vue for the last, like, I don't know, year or so, and I never have enough time to. Oh, what's up? Someone saying something? Sorry. Sorry, I heard some audio there, but yeah, I never have enough time to really like work on my front end chops because I'm not a front end developer, I'm a back end developer, so I kind of feel okay knowing that, like, well, you know, things are always going to progress forward. So if I'm missing out, you know, there'll be, you know, there's a new thing for me to kind of like try to learn now, and I'll learn just enough to be a little useful. I don't have to, like, you know, worry that I didn't really dive too deep into Vue as much as I wanted to. So that's how it goes.
And also, front end changes pretty quickly, so you know.
Yeah, I was just talking to a new developer that I met through streaming, actually, and it was kind of funny just considering the different contexts that there is now. Because when I started, it was a lot easier. There's not as much, especially in the JavaScript world, there wasn't as much stuff going on, so it wasn't as overwhelming. And now I feel bad for anybody who comes in. It's like, what the heck is going on, you know? But hey, if Svelte is moving forward and getting some momentum, then hopefully that'll be a little easier to know. At least there's one recommended way, or maybe one that's more recommended anyway.
Right, and all that stuff is getting easier to learn, right? So, like making the front end of a website before React was very difficult to do. So, React isn't the easiest thing in the world to learn, but it's a lot easier than learning like all of the patterns and paradigms and all these maintenance issues and stuff like that. And Svelte is, as time has gone forward, Vue was a lot easier to learn than React, and then Svelte is even easier than Vue. So,
yeah.
The longer you wait, chances are the better it is for you anyway.
I'm down with that, man. I'll hold out then. Maybe another 15 years, I'll finally try front end for seriously,
There we go. Nice.
Yeah, I like this strategy. This strategy will work well for me. I can remain ignorant for long enough, it'll work.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah,
get to the point where you can describe it out with words, and then the AI just goes, "Oh, this is what you want."
I've been complaining to my dev friends about that for years. By the way, I keep telling all you smart people to figure this out, so I can just, as a guy who designs games, I define what I want, and then the computer writes all the code, and I don't have to mess with it.
That'd be
not a
nice.
bad idea. Just say, "I want to make a website."
Yeah. But but mechanics, if you're writing rules, mechanics are fairly easy to describe in a way that a computer could understand, right? Because a person can understand them. A plus B equals C. If I do this plus that, it's going to equal this. It's definitely doable, but I think it's all about the processing power, and then someone smart enough to write basically a framework around that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Imagine how many games there'll be out there when that happens. When anyone can just make a game by speaking into their computer or something.
Yeah, that's for better or for worse, right?
Right.
The stock price of shovels will double.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny considering that, even because we often talk about the problem we have in our community is there's a lot of PHP developers, and I feel like that's just residual from just PHP, like in early web dev stuff, how it's so accessible. And it was really easy to learn, but unfortunately, that means that it's really easy to learn how to do things badly too, and that leads to kind of a I don't know what the word is, but just a lot of games, but not necessarily a lot of great games. So I'm sure there will be, if things do evolve in that direction where it's really easy for anybody to make a game at all, there'll be a similar kind of experience, I would think.
Yeah, that's what the whole internet is doing, right? I mean, the internet is helping remove a lot of the middlemen. So you could write a book today and publish it tomorrow, right? You don't need to go find a publisher and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's great because it allows people to be creative without artificial barriers or middlemen, which create friction, cost and friction. Unfortunately, you now need a filtering system to, get through the dross and find something that's actually decent. But I'd rather have that problem than the problem of there's some amazing writer out there or artist or game designer who can't get a product out because no one will talk to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lower barrier is not a bad thing at all. There does become like a quality issue. But that's kind of where we, funny enough, coming back to what we do, having a means to give players like an understanding or a sense of like, hey, where are the quality games? And then, that just creates a purpose for stuff for people like us,
Yeah, because I think it's funny. I mean, one of the reasons I started with PHP is because when I started to get back into coding, it's like, okay, what's an easy language, that does what I want it to do, right? That meets my requirements. and it's PHP. And then there's people like, oh, well, PHP has got a lot of bad coders in it. And I'm like, well, I'm one of those bad coders, and I'm still going to make a game. I don't care.
That's me.
Yeah.
You're talking about me.
Yeah, that's me. I'm guilty as charged, Your Honor. Now let me get back to work.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, yeah. So, Delta, is there anything else on the agenda there, or is there where we standing with that stuff?
Yeah. So the other thing that I kind of wanted to go over with everyone is the changes for the subreddit. You guys have seen a lot more posts coming through lately, and a lot more of that kind of stuff. So I've been doing a lot of focus on the Reddit and making sure that we're providing something of value there, give people a reason to show up and actually make posts. And activity's increased substantially since we started. So it's obviously having an effect. We're getting more people to the sub. We're getting more people joining the sub, which is great. We're sitting at 4.3K members right now, which is
That's awesome.
So it's pretty good. We're getting up there. So one of the things that I want to do is start the game jam idea. So we talked about that a couple months ago, of doing the game jam based off of the results of the survey. So I'll start drafting that together and get something up on the Discord. But I want to primarily route it through the subreddit, so that most of that is going to happen there. The other thing that I wanted to do is, I kind of wanted to get your guys' feel about all this, doing a virtual beer garden event where all just it's kind of like this, but a lot more like chillax, and you get to share a couple of drinks. So what do you guys think?
I'm down with that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll put something together for that. We'll get that planning. It should be pretty easy going. And then the other thing is I'm gonna start soliciting for game reviews and live streamers to start kicking up the blog and the Twitch channel. So a lot of changes coming in the subreddit. We're gonna start doing a lot more posts, a lot more value added in that area. So yeah, that's what's coming up for the subreddit. If you guys have any ideas of what to do on there or how to use it properly, because I'm not I'm a good Reddit user, not a very good Reddit mod. So,
yeah, there's a lot there. Yeah. But hey, you've been doing a great job, man. I appreciate the effort there, because our Discord has been pretty strong for a while. We've got a pretty great group of people there, but I feel like we have lots of areas for improvement in our Reddit and other places. Not that it's bad, it's just it doesn't have the same kind of consistency, I guess. So seeing that starting to move forward, I think we'll have more people coming in that might not otherwise find out about us. So that's always exciting.
Right. I want to kind of increase the stumble upon factor, because we have very little, if any, stumble upon factor. Reddit's not a very good way for people to stumble upon something that you have, unless you have really popular posts, right? Reddit just shoves it in front of you. But, general activity will help with that. But Twitch is where you stumble upon. YouTube is where you stumble upon. You don't stumble upon a Discord server. Yeah, it's pretty intentful. So I want to try to track more people. Also, Twitter is pretty good to stumble upon stuff there. Increasing activity, traffic, and cross-pollination.
Sure. Yeah. Twitch in particular has been really, really fun to do that for myself, just outside of what we do here, but just generally. I mean, I've been streaming pretty consistently for about 2 months now, and I'm meeting so many great people just because I happen to, at the end of my stream, I go right into theirs. Oh man, there's so many cool people doing so many interesting things. Not just gaming. A lot of the people I've met, they're also musicians, or they're also developers. Funny enough, I found one, I think a day or so ago, just happened to be another web dev. I'm like, oh, didn't expect that. Cool. You start to make all these contacts, and everything starts to circle back on itself and discoverability, just like you're saying. So definitely worthwhile.
That's awesome. That's great. How many followers do you have on Twitch?
I think I've got about 85 or 86.
Damn. Well done. That's
thanks. Yeah, it's been fun, man. It's a great social experience so far. meeting good
Just
people.
remember us little people, Pi. Remember the little people who helped you get there.
Yeah, of course.
Don't forget us when you're big
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I won't
That's
for you
funny.
guys until I get 87 followers. That's the
That's right. Then you're dead to me.
actually, speaking of that, does anybody here? Do you guys do any streaming or have any interest in that? Just in terms of like, because we all do gaming, or I shouldn't say that, but a lot of us do gaming outside of our space, like be it PC games or Xbox or whatever. Do you guys have any interest in dabbling in that at all? Because it's been a positive experience. I'd definitely recommend it.
I've had interest, but I've never had the utilities all set up so it actually look well, and I felt confident about it. Each time that I've done it, every game either runs on full widescreen or sometimes it's 4:3, and setting up different scenes was always a nightmare because I'd always stop streaming after playing a game, and then I come back and I have to reset up completely different scenes. So it's just a lot of work to get started for one day of streaming and realizing I'm probably not going to play this for a year. So,
Right.
So that's what typically why I don't. But I've been interested in it if there's like a frame built for a game or for a common size of window. So if all the PBBGs that I played could fit into like a 2x2 of like I'm playing 4 at once or something like that, setting up scenes like that and maybe a how-to for doing different things would be neat.
Yeah.
So
That's definitely good to know. I mean, I think we could, there's already some general interest within our community. I know that Halifax has been streaming his coding sessions lately, which has been pretty cool. But even just playing games like you're saying, I think we could set up some kind of like a repository of useful files for OBS or whatever to give to people if you wanted to dabble without having to incur all of that kind of technical overhead just to get started. For sure. But yeah, we'll keep that in mind. So what are you guys doing outside of Dev World? You guys any good music? Any good watching anything good? Eating anything good? I know it's tough because we're still pandemic mode, but I feel like there's other things going on still.
Invincible's a great series.
Invincible.
You can find that on HBO Max, I believe. It's from another comic made by the same guy that did Walking Dead, but this one's an animated series.
Okay.
But it's more of a mature story, and by mature I don't mean XXX, adult stuff.
Right.
But it actually is like characters from 18 to 25 dealing with not 15-year-old anime protagonist stuff. So
Okay.
Whoa, anime made for adults? That's crazy.
yeah, exactly. It's like what my story's trying to be, but this guy actually has money to do it.
Nice.
So I just saw a bunch of the cast from Super Troopers. I just found out started a new show called Station 19, and it's about firefighters.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I just saw like a TikTok about it, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" So I haven't seen it yet. So proceed at your own risk. But
Dude, that sounds great. I love Super Troopers.
yes, best, most quotable movie of all time.
Yeah, definitely a good one.
Of all time.
Yeah, we're still looking for stuff to just kind of kill time with because I've been gaming a lot, but sometimes you want to turn off your brain a little bit. It's do something a little more passive and unwind a little bit. I'm definitely taking recommendations if you guys have anything you want to throw out there. I can't even remember the last time I really got into a TV series or anything like that. But it's nice here and there for sure.
Have you seen
Castlevania season 4 coming to Netflix next weekend?
Oh yeah, nice. That was I saw the first season of that. That was spectacular. Really good. Also not made for children, turns out.
Yeah, that's the best stuff, man.
Games weren't made for children. That didn't stop us playing on the NES, though.
That's true.
That is true.
Exactly. Yeah. Our poor ignorant parents. Like, you want this? Sure. Sweet. If you haven't seen The Expanse, you must watch The Expanse. Yes.
Love The Expanse. Yeah.
Oh my god, it's so good. It's just so good.
I was waiting for the most recent season to actually end before I binged it, and I think it has.
This is sounding familiar.
Yeah. They actually use some real science in it, which is pretty amazing for a science fiction series.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a lot of real science, and most of the show.
It's a lot of real science. Yeah, I thought I was in the wrong place or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I liked Futurama so much. It was funny, but it was informed.
Right.
Yeah, Futurama was awesome. I love that show.
Yeah, they grapple with some serious topics too, like the one where Bender's in space and becomes a god, and like
Oh yeah, man.
it was actually like a kind of episode for Futurama. Yeah, great series.
Oh, we got a recommendation in chat. Dr. Quandary says Stowaway is a great movie in that vein. Have you guys seen that at all?
No.
Stowaway.
Cool, thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like some of the more adult stuff in particular is interesting to me because it has more opportunity to get into not necessarily darker stuff, but heavier stuff sometimes. I feel like that gets really, really interesting when that stuff gets explored.
Yeah.
My fiance and a buddy of mine were just talking about how murder mysteries are popular, and that kind of deals with some darker stuff too. But it was funny because I was saying like I can't really get into murder, like true crime stuff. It's just not my thing. I feel like it's maybe a little too like dark or morbid for me. But what's weird is that I'll say that, and then I'll go watch like Apocalypse Now. I don't know where that difference comes into play for me, but for some reason.
Well, Apocalypse Now is at least a war movie on the surface, right?
Sure.
As opposed to this serial killer or other weird thing going on. So.
That's why I think Futurama really could explore those areas, because it was all done under the guise of humor, and so they could be done with it if they wanted to, but it was still okay,
Yeah,
sure.
That's the beauty of sci-fi, right? Sci-fi has always been able to explore things that the mainstream culture is not ready to talk about yet. And you can get it away because it's a robot instead of a person, or whatever, instead of an alien instead of a person. So I think that people who criticize sci-fi, just like people who criticize PHP, it's like, I don't think you understand it, right? I don't think you understand the potential, and there's certainly all kinds of variations of it, just like any other genre. But you can really explore some deep issues with it under with a cool story to boot.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I never thought about what you just said there about it being like, you remove the humans from it. Like I said, robots, aliens, whatever, and you really get to kind of like play in a safer space when it comes to writing, because you're not going to offend as many people. You're going to kind of disassociate that identity that people are sensitive about, and that's interesting. It sounds like there's some freedom that comes with that. I never really realized that.
Isn't that what Star Trek did a lot? Sorry.
Yes. But that's kind of a cheat code in the writing world. Anytime that you're able to just say, I'm writing fantasy, so if there's a topic I don't know the exact limitations of or how this would interact, I'm just going to write my own rules for it. So if I was about to make a movie that's like the fantasy version of Interstellar, I don't need to do NASA research to figure it out. Just some brief research to just know the concepts and know, okay, so that's what it was like in the 2000s, but how do we do it in the future?
Right.
And I just make up my own rules and be like, someone else invent that to make this entire thing easier.
Right.
Yeah, because it makes sense.
Like warp drive.
Yeah. How do we get from there to there? Well, that's when you can get more interesting, because you have a new basis to be like, what are the rules of that?
Yeah.
You get to make your own stuff and how it's interesting.
That's where writing really, I think, is a lot of fun, when you create those special rules and then you just get to play around with those rules and find how other people interact around them, same way.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is to make them consistent, right? Because I think that's where a lot of shows that I watch, movies or TV series, it's like you've created this new world, you've created this, new laws of the universe, as it were, but then there's no consistency among it, right? There's all this other weird stuff, and I think that's the beauty of world building, where everything connects together. And when some new thing unfolds, you say, yeah, that's exactly how I would expect that new thing to unfold based on the laws of this universe as I know them. Instead of it being sloppy writing of, well, we needed something to happen, kind of a Deus Ex Machina thing or something of like, well, we suddenly got magic and this new rule that makes no sense suddenly happens and it saves the day.
Yeah. That's why I find some mediums a lot easier to get into than others. Like video games are a lot easier to get into, unless you do silly shit like Assassin's Creed. And then it's just all over the place. But, video games has become such a strong storytelling device that, look at Sensua Blade, The Last of Us. There's been some spectacular stories created in video games. Half-Life, Horizon Zero Dawn, the story behind that was amazing. Has anyone played it?
I have not.
Is anyone
I've watched
going to play it?
gameplay of it.
Okay.
I've heard good things.
Yes.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, well, one, it's gorgeous. The gameplay is spectacular. The mechanics are great, and everything's super fluid and really well made. But the story behind it is, it's not really much of a spoiler, I guess. But the humanity created a machine that could build more of itself as to fight wars for it, right? So there was this one company that created all these robots to go and fight other robots. And then they finally created one robot that could create more robots. Well, shocker, it went haywire and then destroyed the entire planet and started killing everybody. And they're like, okay, well, the Zero Dawn was after, like, 1,000 years after the robots destroyed the entire planet, and the planet is coming, the biosphere is coming back. They saved, like, cloning pods and started cloning people to restart humanity, like 1,000 years after all this goes down. So all the robots that look like animals and stuff like that, that's all because of, it's all thematic and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've seen it there, and it looked intriguing. Like, it had an initial, draw, but I had no idea. I couldn't figure out, like, okay, what's the deal there? Obviously, I haven't played it, so I wouldn't know the storyline. But it sounds like there's really, really good backstory there. That's awesome.
Very deep backstory. The DLC goes into, like, more of it and more of the future and stuff like that. But yeah, like, the whole discovery piece for it and the whole universe that they create is good. So good.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's what really gives me a lot of appreciation for writing and gaming, because at least for me, in the games that I make, I'm always struggling just to implement, just to develop, let alone write or design or get art done and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But having the idea, like, man, if the resources were there, if I de-scope my stuff maybe or something, I could actually dabble a little bit into some lore or some kind of, like, thematic stuff. That sounds so, like, it's easy to be inspired by the stuff that you're talking about, because it just gets the creative juices flowing,
Yeah, right.
That's
exactly.
the dev dilemma, right? Because if you're coding, you're not world building. If you're not world building, you're not lore building. And I go through that. It's like I'm coding and coding. I'm like, this coding is driving me crazy. It'd be nice to just sit down and write about the gods or the great crusade to the land of Angar the Undying, or But if you're doing that, you're not doing something else. So you got to, it's like constant juggling of which item is the critical one for this moment that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm probably ahead of the curve by this one by maybe 10 to 15 years, but there's, I think, a war that's going to happen in the game creation world when it comes to writers. Because right now, you can go on YouTube and watch most story-based games just as a Let's Play. And you can get the entire thing spoiled for you and watch all the cutscenes without paying for anything. Yeah. But you can't enjoy the gameplay without buying the game.
Right.
Unless you pirate it, obviously. But watching it so far, you haven't done anything illegal, and it's perfectly fine. So my contribution to a game, unless it's formatted in a way where you can't simply make YouTube videos for it, could just be washed away. So you take a game like the first Gears of War, which a lot of people really like. Imagine if it was just the single-player game. It'd probably only be like $30 worth instead of a full $60 because of the multiplayer and the horde mode and stuff like that came with the other ones. So how do you actually value a game if the story is supposed to be a main part of it, if most of it could just be watched on YouTube?
Yep. Yeah. No.
But I had that. That's a good point. But I think that the people who are willing to pay are willing to pay. For instance, I would not watch. So hey, you said, hey, watch this it's a great story game. Go do this game. The last thing I would do is go watch it on YouTube. So those individuals aren't your potential client base anyway, right? I would want to experience that. I would want to play the game and get the story. And I do happen to want to pay creators. So I think that's the answer is that there's always going to be people who are going to pirate, right? It's not that hard in the grand scheme of life these days. But you have people who are willing to pay, and those are the ones you need. If you get to them, they're going to pay for your content, and then keep coming back if you want to keep making content.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good point though, in terms of like how writing can be. I wouldn't say devalued, but I understand the challenge there, because it's really easy to get some of that or a lot of that satisfaction in the curiosity of knowing what's going to happen next without investing into actually participating. And I feel like that's going to just be a general game design challenge of how do you integrate a narrative in a way that requires interactivity. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is I don't know if you guys ever played Metal Gear Solid 2, or no, the first one way back in the day. there was this enemy that you fought. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but during the course of the battle, he was like a mind reader or something. And during the course of the battle, your screen went blank, and it was like, what the heck, is my game tripping out? What's going on? And it was this really like, confusing thing. But what it was is, your visuals will come back or whatever. And what it was is, in the context of the game, you had to unplug your controller from the first port and plug it into the second one. And that was him like messing with you as a player, not as the character in the game.
So cool.
It was so brilliant.
Yeah, Psychomantis.
Psychomantis, that was his name, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuff, I feel like, you just can't get that by watching. You have to feel that kind of thing. And
that requires a very specific type of writing that involves some like inner workings with the developers. So you can't just be like, I'm going to write the scripts, you just throw it into the game and do whatever.
Right.
And that's exactly it. It requires an investment, and if games are going to be made to be as profitable as possible, that stuff like that's obviously going to get cut, because it's there's more money to be had by making it a little more generic, or cutting those kinds of corners and making it more
Call of Duty.
Yeah, and the whole game is an ecosystem, right? Because even as coming from the game designer side, like, what mechanic am I going to invent tomorrow that's never been invented, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what mechanism am I going to invent that's never been invented? So I think it's not the stories we tell, right? We're human beings. We've been telling stories for thousands of years. We're telling the same story over and over, but we're telling it in cool ways. And so I think it's the same thing, right? When you go to play a game, it's that entire experience. It's if it's a story element to the game, it's the story with the mechanics, with the ease of use, with the feeling, maybe the community around it. With something here like with the persistent browser-based group, that community and belonging to something. And even just that belonging to something ups the game, right? It ups the experience. And so, I really like that thought. And that's something I've been kind of studying the last 5 years, a lot of, community building and kind of what you can do around games to get that kind of, situation set up where the players are supporting the players plus supporting the devs, and it becomes, there's a synergy to that really builds a strong connection and builds retention to players and all that other happy stuff we're supposed to be doing in the business side of things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and that's what makes the difference between like a good game and a great game, and even like an amazing game that's going to be on your top 3 forever kind of thing. I know, especially now where we are with media, in modern times, there's so many more interesting opportunities to like break out of the confines of just a single medium. So there are games that have done this where like you play the game on PlayStation or whatever, but then there's a website that if you want to, you can go check that out, and that's like an expansion on top of your overall experience. And then there's something else over here and something else over there, and that kind of stuff. I feel like that's what stands out. But of course, it takes an investment. It takes particularly creative teams, and takes innovation, all that kind of stuff. So it is really great when you find it, though.
It's hunting for that elusive unicorn, right? We're all looking for that elusive unicorn. Yeah.
Looking to be the next WoW. Yeah. And speaking of WoW, people probably haven't been playing WoW for over 10 years because of all the great, fantastic, high quality graphics, right? They're playing it because they make friends and families on there. It's the other people that make WoW what it is. If it were single player, no one would play it.
Yeah,
sure.
And I got out of WoW because I have some great friends who still play and talk to me on a regular basis about coming back. But I got bored with the mechanics, right? Because to me it was like, I've got my sequence, I've got the game figured out intellectually, and I hit this, then I hit that, and hit that, and it was the friends that kept me around for as long as I did afterwards. And then they're the siren song of like, hey, come back, come on, there's new things.
Let's hang out.
Come on,
play.
Yeah, it's a social experience more than the game, because you already beat it in a way. You solved the puzzle.
Yeah.
No, it's what's up?
That's the sad truth of PBBGs right now. I've never actually played one for the story because no one invests in it.
Right.
That's true.
On either side, development or the players. So
Well,
it's not that I'm hoping to break the wheel there of like changing things, but I do hope to actually have a story in at least 2.0 of the game I'm working on.
Have you ever played
and so
Fallen London before, Devin?
Say that one again?
Fallen London?
No, I've not.
So it's basically, they just wanted to tell a whole bunch of stories and they stuck it inside of a browser. And and put a couple of game mechanics on top of it. It is a really, really cool game. I highly suggest checking it out. People literally at the Discord for it, you can't spoil the story. So it's like it's just a fictional kind of London, and you just go around doing stories, right? And it's just like the plot of all this stuff, and then some pieces are connected, but fundamentally it's a single player game because you're experiencing these stories. So in the Discord, there's a lot of like non-spoiler specific stuff about stories that people haven't got to yet, and a lot of rules around that. Awesome. But yeah, it's amazing experiencing stories with other people. So cool. That's why we go to movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the interesting thing around that is, taking a lesson from role-playing games is that if you're game mastering a role-playing game, in theory, and I know a lot of game masters don't necessarily do this, the players are the ones telling the story, right? As a game master, you set up the environment, you adjudicate the rules, right? You may give them challenges. You may even build, as the writer per se, you may build an overall arc and maybe some plots within that, but then the players tell the story. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And in fact, when I ran my 4X, and I'd be guilty as charged with my 4X, I slapped a story on there because it needed a story, right? It's really a strategic, space, 4X. But what I did when I ran it for my friends, there was 9 players, is I had the Nebula Network news that released every, turn, and it had game stuff they needed to know, but I left sections in there for the players to put propaganda and stories, and they all built empires. So we had a monarchy, we had a president, we had Emperor Dude, who was the science guy, and the players made this amazing story that was talked about well beyond the group of players. And I just had to sit there and go, hey, yeah, go guys, go do some things, So I think that's something too, because you talk about engagement. People love to tell stories. So if you can set the environment for them, the players will weave something that's completely amazing and will take it places that a single writer, no matter how good that single writer is, or a couple writers in a team, would have never thought of.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like that's where the collaboration between the developers and the players becomes really, really, valued. Is players themselves. That's going to be the source, the catalyst of novel things. Stuff like you're saying you would never think of. But they may not necessarily have the skills to, or know, have the background to know how to construct a proper narrative. Right. They might, but some of them might not. So if you have a developer,
that's where you can set structure, right?
Yeah,
if you set the structure to allow them to go forth and do great things. I mean, it was sort of like the beginning of the conversation of a template for a streamer, right? Like say, hey, I want to stream, but I'm intimidated by the technology and I don't know how it works. And, hey, I got to click this button and, input A, B, and C, and then I can start streaming. I think it's the same thing. You take that cognitive load of structure off the player's plate and let them go forth. And then what you'll find is you've got some natural storytellers. And this is what I saw. I had some people I knew would tell good stories that were telling great stories. And I see this around my table because I run my monthly role-playing game. But then what will happen is those will start to lift up the people who aren't as either confident and maybe are creative or didn't think they were creative. And then suddenly they start telling the stories. And I can tell you I have 9 players right now in my game, 10 players. It's hard to keep track some days. And every one of them, this campaign has a phenomenal backstory. They're role playing to their character. And some of them I wouldn't consider, they're not even necessarily gamers. They got drug into this somehow. So there's a power to that. If you give it, they will come sort of thing, right?
Sure. Cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Value in providing like direction. You're not going to, micromanage anything. You're just going to set up like hey, here's a setting, here's some themes, and go play.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, because I've been putting together a presentation I'm going to do next Wednesday on building a community, and one of the things I really liked is kind of doing a more formal study of it, is that when you're building a community, you're to provide leadership, not management. Under the philosophy of, you have to set guidelines, you have to do some moderation, right, and stuff. But at the end of the day, my conclusion was that the culture will emerge organically from the community members. Mm-hmm. And in order for that to happen, the community members have to have a vested interest, right? They have to have a mechanism by which they can engage with the community and participate in the community. So I think those little things of, you have to be there, right? There has to be the benevolent overlord. But other than that, it's mostly staying out of the way, except for those times you need to, touch down on Earth, as it were, and fix something.
Yeah, stimulate the creativity. Give people freedom and space to do what they want to do. Actually, on that note, you guys here, how many of you guys are into tabletops or role playing generally? I've never actually really tried myself, but always wanted to.
Yeah. I love tabletop role playing games, and I've run my game now for 30 something years, whatever it's been. I've been playing for longer than that, counting D&D and stuff. And I find the stories. I mean, we've had things happen in role playing. For instance, say back in college when I first built the game that I'm publishing this year, we have stories we still talk about, and that's 30 something years ago, right?
Wow.
There's in jokes in my group of friends that someone will say something and we'll all start laughing. That happened, back in those days, and how powerful is that? I mean, where you're
awesome.
literally building a cultural narrative through sitting around, and the trope of wearing robes and lighting candles and worshiping Satan or whatever we're supposed to be doing, just building these powerful things, within a group of friends.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to dive into that just because I've always been so intrigued. Just as soon as I heard about the concept, it's like, oh man, there's a part of me that wants to participate in that creative process, but I've always felt intimidated. So do you guys have any recommendations on if someone was to just kind of go in as a total newbie? Is there any thing you would say to avoid or anything in particular to try?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is to make sure, and it's hard to make sure of this, but to have a decent game master, because the game master really drives the experience. And I've seen a lot of bad ones, and and it is there's game masters who want to tell a story and you're just along for the ride. And that doesn't feel good, right? Because it's like, well, he's just narrating to me this whole time, and I was.
You want to do something?
So, yeah, I don't think the game system is that important. So you can pick any genre you like. There's game systems I played in that I hate the game system, but I had a great time anyway.
Okay.
So I think it's diving in and being free. I mean, I think Pi, you jumped in on my game. Where we had the character who had got the maggot of Psi, who was the god of death, in his arm, right?
Yeah.
That was a totally spontaneous thing. It was not planned on my part, so that's the time when players do something that you don't expect, and
right.
I kind of ran with it, and that's turned into an ongoing storyline that's been funny. We've had a great time with it, and the character's worried because he's got this maggot of the god of death in his arm. So I think as far as being intimidating, it's like just get in there and have fun, right? Think about your character concept and just enjoy the experience.
Nice,
and if you don't get in a good group, get the hell out. I mean, I definitely think sitting there going, well, this is supposed to be fun, and maybe if they beat me for a year or two, I'll begin to like it. There's good game masters out there, and you can even try your own hand at it. I mean, I know it's intimidating if you've never played, but it takes a little organization, but you can run a game for a few friends that you're comfortable with, and you can all explore it together and learn the lessons. You're not going to do it perfect. I sometimes get done with a session and go, oh, I had the perfect thing to say to the character when he did that, but it's too late,
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. It's my understanding in ways. It's highly social, obviously. So if you're going to be with people who are, you click with socially, or they're welcoming or whatever, that it's kind of like a lot of other, gaming situations where that could, the game does matter, but maybe it doesn't matter as much as how it's presented.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is there's different types of gamers, and so there's social gamers. They're just there to have a good time, maybe drink a beer and eat some chips, right? Yeah. You've got combat gamers. They like to beat I get beat up all week at work, and I want to kill things on the weekend, and this way it keeps me from killing coworkers next week, right? There's exploration gamers, so that's it too, kind of finding your group, and that's one thing that I've always recommended as, for instance, a game master. I run the kind of game I want to play in, and if you're interested in that kind of game, come play. If you're not, that's cool. Go find another game. And I'm really clear about how I have strengths and weaknesses, and here's my strengths and here's my weaknesses, and just operating within that.
Okay. You pretty much brought up what was the actual joke within the tabletop community, which is when I'm new, what character do I play? And the answer is you play the character the GM at that table wishes they were playing.
Right.
So
there you go.
You know right away that character's involved in major story arcs and is going to be able to push the plot along. So you ask the DM what your story is going to be, and can I actually have a character that's along the lines of something that's going to be a through line? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to trip up and do the wrong thing generally. I mean, as a character, you can make mistakes. That's perfectly acceptable. But at least as an element of the story, you're going to follow along. And even if you actually betray that, it still creates interesting, marks of the story.
Plus, if you're
you can
playing,
always be the healer, right? You can always be the equivalent of the healer, because you got the people who want to smash things and the people who want to do tricky stuff, and it's like, hey, I'm going to be the support character who helps you guys all be better. And I would always ask, like, if I was going to join a game, because one of the ways I game, if I join a group, I say, what's everyone going to do? And then I'll pick something that complements that. And I don't think that's necessary to do, but I like to do that because it makes me play different characters. But if you're in doubt, if you walk into a new group and say, I want to be some kind of support character, what kind of support do we need? You will be loved and you will be protected. And in fact, one of the friends playing in my game now had never played a game before, my age, and I said, what, are you interested in being a healer? And she said, yes, I'd love to be the healer. So we sat down and worked out her spells and how they worked. And I will tell you, every other member of that party would have died to protect her, because you protect the healer, something's going on. So it really got her engaged with everyone. And yet she had one mission too, because I think you don't want to go out there and take a super complicated character build, as a new person, and then you're trying to learn all these mechanics. So often I recommend take something like in my game system, for instance, just take an archer, you shoot things, so you don't have to worry about parrying and, spur strokes and, so play within the limitations that you're comfortable with, but there's always a place. And the fact is, if everyone's a fighter and you want to be a fighter, be a party of fighters and run around and do fighter stuff. That's
part of a clan. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Randy, that you talked about your GMing stuff, but you other guys in chat here, do you guys play more, or do you participate more on the player side, or do you run the games yourselves?
I'm more of a player, and the reason for that is, even though I'm a writer, I write theme parks. So, roller coaster. That's the opposite one, not sandbox. So I'm terrible at sandbox. If I write a story, it's going to actually be to tell very particular things that require certain events to happen, for characters to react a certain way, because that's how they would in my story. If I run into stuff like that and I'm trying to run as a game, players are going to interact in any kind of way, and it's going to derail the story that I want, and I have to recreate an entire story every single session. It's not good for the way that I actually create. But I enjoy being a player so that I can actually interact and craft a story for myself that, GMs that are good at adapting will be like, I know exactly where you're going with this. We're going to tell a good story with that.
Nice. Yeah, I see.
I like playing a lot too. I'm not sure if I have the organization skills or the patience required to do a DM. Not necessarily opposed to trying it, but I don't think I would be the best DM out there. I really like being a player. Most of the campaigns that I've played were, it was the D&D mechanics, but everything else was just silly nonsense. Mm-hmm. We had a guy rolling around on a rascal scooter that could shoot nukes out of the back, right? Like, it was just nonsense. So, yeah. But super, super fun.
I feel like that kind of stuff would appeal to me. Not that I don't take games seriously, because I do, but I find so much value in humor and absurdity. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Randak, we were just talking the last time about how I feel like there's a very strong comparison to improv comedy or improv in general. And I just recently took a improv class for the first time, actually, and I learned something really cool. That there's a saying, like, there are no mistakes, because every mistake it creates an opportunity, and it's something to run with. And I feel like that's a comparison to what you guys are talking here, where, like, if you're playing within a game where your character does make a mistake, or if you as a player makes a mistake, it's just another source of something else to take off in a different direction.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. In fact, when stories go off the rails, it's really when things get interesting, right? Because if the monsters run out and you all use your best ability and you slaughter them instantly, how satisfying is that if you do it every time, right? So when someone fumbles and they're suddenly in a precarious position, or they accidentally open Pandora's box, oh crap, that was a bad idea. I do think those create those moments, right? And I do think improv is the perfect. I mean, gaming is improv as a player, and you get more or less that depending on who the game master is. But that ability to just go out there and think on the fly, and when you're doing it with others, that's good too, because you'll have someone step up if you're like, I don't know what to do right now. Hope someone else can kind of step into the gap there and do something while you kind of get your thoughts together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's also a major difference between TTRPGs and most other games, because most other games run on the Skinner box principle of you need to roll high enough, you need to succeed, or else the story doesn't go forward. If you fail, you get punished. You lose life. Maybe you can't do that side quest anymore. Stuff like that. In TTRPG, something that both GMs and players need to understand is that rolling a failure on a die obviously wasn't the player's fault or the DM's fault. So you have to actually roll with that in some sort of way that still makes the player feel like they're engaged in the story and they're not going to get punished by always rolling poorly. So stories have to be flexible to the point of letting people feel like, okay, maybe there's things I'm not good at, or maybe there's things I am good at, and I still actually have a chance of failure. But you can either choose to laugh at it or actually make it an interesting point of, maybe I'm cursed. It's not actually a mechanical thing, but maybe just that day there's a curse, and the GM can just say, well, maybe you did actually run into a witch that other day. Who knows? And maybe you run into them, and that's actually the end of the session. So everything's an opportunity, like he said.
Cool.
I like that because it feels like it creates depth in what the meaning of the goal is. Because like you're saying, in any other game, like I don't know, Pong or something or whatever, you have a very static, concrete, like you have to get a certain amount of points or whatever, and that's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great in its own ways. But it sounds like what you guys are talking about is like the failure of a dice roll, for example. That's really, technically it's a failure because within that mechanic it's failure. But within the larger intent of the experience, it's just another thing that moves it along. That sounds really
it's progress.
Yeah, you're
Everything
not going to say shame on you for rolling twos all day.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, your party will say that.
Don't touch my dice. Don't get away.
I had a character 2 years ago who rolled 3 criticals in a row. We were playing in a weird Wild West game, so it was kind of right after the Civil War. So D&D 5th edition rules with guns, so you weren't wearing armor.
Cool.
And I had a carny gambler, and I almost died under a snowbank, and we're still laughing about that because I got caught under a snowbank and then fumbled a few times in a row, and it's like I did all this great stuff and then I die under a bank of snow. I mean,
right.
and if I would have died, I would have died. It would have been, so you make those moments. Later in that same game, I jumped through a sliding stone wall. And the game master says, you realize that if you don't make this, you're going to die. And I'm like, yeah, but that's what my character would do, right?
Yeah.
And I made the die roll, right? And if I would have died, I would have died. I wouldn't have been mad as a player. I would have re-rolled it, made another character. But it was an awesome moment where the gambler took the gamble and it worked,
Yeah.
Dude, that sounds so great.
Well, it sounds like we need a PBBG, game session sometime. We'll run a game for the crew. That would be kind of a fun thing.
That would be awesome.
I was thinking the same thing, man. It's funny hearing you talk about that because so when I play any game in general, like I'll be playing let's say a Zelda game or something. The way that I like to play games is to try stuff that sounds stupid. It sounds like it's a waste of time. It's just exploring the world, exploring the mechanics, just goofing off almost. And within the context of a role-playing game, like you're saying, I feel like it'd be hard for me not to want to say, like, well, I probably shouldn't do this, but my character can't help it. So what's going to happen? That sounds fun.
The thing about role-playing is if you've built your character that way, that's what he would do. The balance point on that is, and this becomes the community part of a gaming party, as it were, walking that line of not doing it to screw up everyone else's story, right? but to reinforce your own. And I game with a group of guys. In fact, he's one of those guys that he wants to push every button. And so he's like, look, my character would push this button, and then oh no, here we go.
Yeah. Summon another lich. Yeah.
I've evolved from every stage of being a munchkin to being a more sophisticated mechanical gamer because I started when I was like 13. Picking up the old 3.0 books and then playing Baldur's Gate on PC.
Cool.
And my evolution of that is that, yes, I started out as like, how do I actually use the mechanics to roll higher damage numbers or hit more often or hit more things and stuff like that. And I ended up turning into, how do I actually make like a mechanically sophisticated character where I can still do somewhat simple things, but things that a character's normally not supposed to do. Like in 4th edition, I fell in love with this, even though a lot of people hate that edition, but whatever, I loved it. Like I rolled a ranger that completely confused my party because I dual wield bolas, and I would just throw them, and I could actually immobilize 2 things, but I deal no damage, none, and they're supposed to be a striker class, and you can just do that, just dual throw, and then you immobilize 2 things on the opposite end, like the 2 giant ogres on the opposite end of the map, and guess what? This encounter's controlled. And you guys do the damage. I'm just gonna be busy throwing bolas all day. So
That's awesome.
But that's where I think building that culture of a party, because one of the things when I do is a new party starts, and I'm in the final year of the campaign I'm running now, but each party has, because of the characters they've chosen, gets a feel for it. Like I had one, we called them the warrior party because they were all more individualistic, right? And they tended to do their own thing. And then we had the soldier party. They had a front line and flankers, and so I think it's kind of cool. That's one of the cool things to me, is that puzzle aspect of the game, is what resources do we have, right? What kind of character classes and how do they act, and and how do we build something around that to become greater than the sum of our parts and overcome better and better obstacles that the game master throws at us, right? And that becomes kind of the cool aspect to me of, okay, here's what we have. We got a dual-wielding bola thrower. All right, well, there's our battlefield controller for that. We've got the...
Who needs a wizard?
The wizard guild is going to protest.
Yeah.
Yeah, they show up in the middle of the night, a bunch of hooded wizards, like, you've been getting into our turf there, Ranger.
It's so cool hearing you guys talk about this. I'm very intrigued. I'm going to put this on my list to explore, just to check it out. I do wonder though. One thing that I like in stories generally is self-reference and breaking the fourth wall. Within reason. Sometimes it's done a bit too much, but when it's done right, it feels really, really good. And I'm wondering if you guys have ever experienced that within these types of games, where part of the campaign or part of the narrative involves knowing that you're part of a game. Have you guys ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's funny because the rule book I've written, I had someone look at it who is an art director, and he said, "Oh, there's parts of your rules that basically break the fourth wall, and it breaks my immersion of reading your rules." And I said, "Well, I'm not afraid to break the fourth wall," and it was good feedback, because then there's a thing of the rules that, like, if someone's totally into immersion of the rules, but I even told him, I said, "There's a lot of mechanics in my rules. It's a crunchy system." So the total immersion guy is probably not going to be totally immersed in it anyway. So I'm not doing that permanent damage. But and that's the beauty, is you can do whatever you want, right? I mean, it's a shared social experience. It's not.
Sure.
We make jokes as old timers of the Gary Gygax days. If you're not doing it the Gary Gygax way, it's not an official D&D game, and you shouldn't play it, right? The fact is, it's your game. It's your as the game master, it's your game and your player's game. And you get to do whatever the heck you want with it. And just like you talking about the humor, like I love the humor stuff. I love graveyard humor too. So we've got the graveyard humor plus the humor and people making the jokes as we do things. And,
yeah. That sounds great. I like that in a lot of media where it's good to have those moments where things are taken seriously, and that's important too. But sometimes I like that aspect where you could almost things do become a parody, or the rules well enough to break them in an informed way to make it really interesting and kind of like just self-reflecting, I guess. But it sounds like there's a lot of creative freedom there.
And you can set up situations. So one of the things that I started doing a couple campaigns ago is, about a third of the way through my campaign, I'll have the players, and I do this for experience points, basically the fame points in my game. I say fame points, it's not judged on quality, it's just doing it, right? If you do it, you get all the points. And you write a thing called What I Did on My Summer Vacation, basically, right? So the party will be at a break point where, like, you're tired, you've been fighting, you've been questing, you've been doing all this stuff. You're now in downtime. Write a story about either what you did or something about your backstory. And that's where players, like, we had one of my players write this story, like he and one of the other characters were riding on a rhinoceros through town. I mean, there was just all this crazy stuff. So it just gives the players permission to, like, this doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to fit into the game system. It doesn't have to just write something, And
that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
I really like that. Never had that before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of my parties that I played in a long time ago, it sort of became a table rule after it happened the first time. But when one of our characters died, he came back to life, and the GM allowed him to actually talk in fourth wall breaking.
Oh no!
Because he had been to another realm. So he just made references to things in the real world as if he had been there.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
interesting.
I like the challenge of the other players to try to, like, then you have to translate that. Okay, how does my character react? Even though I know what's going on, they don't know what's going on, and they know that their character. There's all this, like, it gets really confusing in an interesting way, I would think.
Yeah,
that's the complication with the story I'm writing, because it's actually very meta with isekai. The characters within my stories are people that either are real and are playing a game, but they're mostly known as the character in the game. But they can sometimes refer to each other, if they know each other outside of the game, as the player. And other people are the synthetic users. I think I mentioned that in chat, which, they died and now they're actually inside of the game. So you're wondering, are they actually human? So it's very meta, and a lot of people can't grasp that dual, level personal being.
It could be a lot. It's a cognitive load for sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It's an investment, but I feel like the payoff is really there because you get to there's just so many levels of not just complexity, but just just the creativity that you get to experience through that. It sounds so rewarding.
Yeah.
Do you think the barrier for entry in your game would be quite high in that case?
Because of that element, no. 1.0 is just going to be a game. You're going to see it as a game. There's not going to be the story until 2.0, and for a lot of the points, you're going to be introduced to it by NPCs and such like that. Mm-hmm. You're not going to actually go through the experience of logging in and logging out. But I personally recommend anyone that actually wants to better understand this, if you have a PS2 or an emulator for it, just play the .hack GU series from PS2.
I was just thinking about that.
Or it's on Steam now. The quadrilogy is actually on there. Highly recommend it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's a skill to that too. Of you do have these complex concepts that you can do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm the player, as long as you're pacing it correctly. You don't throw them all at once. Say, here, this is what's going on. It's like, what the heck? I don't get it. It's like, okay, you tease it out a little bit. You walk them through some parts, then gradually you start progressively expanding.
And if you can make it, one of the things I think is interesting is if you have some sophistication going on in the background, but the main storyline on the surface is really good, right? You can have those players who aren't into maybe the depth of the story as much, who are driving forward on that main storyline and enjoying it. And I do think, and this is one of the things my editor taught me, like a lot of times, even if like a reader from an editing perspective, like a reader doesn't necessarily understand this, but subconsciously they get it. And it will create either a bad feeling if it's not done well or a good feeling. So I can see the same thing with your story of, here's the story. Hey, this was really cool and I enjoyed it and I played through and I got to whatever the end point is. But there was a sophisticated stuff going on in the background for people who are so inclined or paying attention, and then maybe I played it through not thinking about that, and then I read about the sophisticated stuff, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to go back through and pay attention this time to those other elements that are deeper.
Oh yeah, that's what makes great games in general. I was just talking to another developer about BioShock. I'm not sure if you guys have played those games at all.
Oh yeah, I played the BioShock. That's great.
Yeah, I feel like it's really really good about that. It's like you play it through. It's great. It's a great experience, and you could dabble into the extra stuff as much as you want, and or as little as you want, and it'll be fine. But if you do take your time to explore a little bit, it's that other stuff becomes so incredibly rewarding and augments the experience that you're already having.
Yeah, they did really well with the world building in BioShock.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the great, even the way they set up the atmosphere and stuff too, right? So the way that the atmosphere and stuff supported the world building, I thought was really
yeah.
They did that really well in We Happy Few. Same thing. It was a lot of world building, a lot of atmospherics supporting the narration. Very, very cool, fun game.
Awesome.
It leaned very heavily on the aesthetic at the very beginning, with some of the plot points kind of just being nailed into you at the start.
Yes.
But as you actually start getting through the game, a lot more
yes.
depth. Yes, literally.
Yeah. Super cool game though.
Nice.
I wanted to get away from my day job. Why do we start here?
Yeah, I know. Right.
That's the reason why I couldn't get into Persona 5 when it first came out. I bought it, but the thing is, the first 3 chapters ends with one of your companions telling you to go to bed, and I was 30 years old, so I'm like, okay. And I just turned off the game.
I guess I will.
I couldn't turn it back on, because if the next 5 chapters are like this, I'm just not going to be able to be awake.
It'll take me forever to get through the game. That's funny. All right. Well, we've been at this a little over an hour for the PBBG site live stream. So I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. And I have a couple things that I need to do today. But you guys feel free and chill and hang out if you want to. Good talk. Yeah, good meet.
Yeah, definitely. Good time. I'm actually going to head out myself. We're going a little over, but it was a great conversation. Thank you guys for joining. Really appreciate your time and providing your insights. It's been really fun.
Yeah. It's always fun.
Yeah. So anybody watching, this event is for the PBBG.com website. We're a community of players, developers, game developers and web developers to focus on persistent browser-based games. We'll drop a link to the Discord here, and we have the website and all that kind of stuff. I'm also streaming this on my personal Fuhan Pi channel, so that's twitch.tv/FuhanPi, and it's also on twitch.tv/PBBG site. That's a mouthful, but hey, before you go, do you guys have anything you want to plug before you head out? Feel free to put it out there if you want. If not, we'll be back again in 2 weeks.
Game on, baby. Game on.
All right. See you guys.